Chapter 2. Aria. Outside the hospital, it was a cloudy day. No blue sky, no sunlight, no shade. So it was strange when a shadow formed in the middle of the parking lot. It started as a blot and spread across the pavement. Even if there had been a sun out, casting shadows, there was no source nearby. No car, no lamppost, and certainly no person to cast this particular one. The impossible shadow grew until it was roughly the size and shape of a 12-year-old girl with long, wavy hair. And once it was done growing, the shadow changed. It went from dark to blinding white, as if 100 lights had been turned on somewhere deep inside of it. And out of the light came a girl. In one slow, fluid motion, like coming up through water, the girl rose out of the mark on the ground. And when she was standing on top of the girl-shaped puddle of white, the blinding light inside went off like a switch. The girl looked down at her shadow approvingly. "Nice work," she said to it. The shadow seemed pleased, fidgeting happily beneath her feet. The girl looked around, marveling at the fact she was here, even if here was a hospital parking lot on a cloudy afternoon. And a thrill ran through her at the thought of being somewhere, being someone. There was only one problem. The girl in the parking lot didn't know who she was. That is to say, she knew what she was, but this was her first day as a who. And now that she was a who, she couldn't help but wonder what type of who she was. She brought her hands up in front of her face, as if they would tell her. And in a way they did. A blue bracelet circled her wrist, bare except for a pendant, with a name carved on it in small, delicate script. Aria. She tested the word on her tongue a few times and liked it. "My name is Aria," she told her shadow. It gave the slightest nod. And then she looked down at herself for the first time. She was delighted to find she was wearing a green shirt and a white skirt, with pockets and a pair of bright blue leggings that ran right into her sneakers. The laces on the shoes were white until Aria, she really did like the name, decided she'd rather have purple ones. As soon as she thought it, color began to seep down the shoestrings, turning them violet. Aria smiled and caught up a chunk of her hair, holding it in front of her eyes so she could see the color. Even in the gray day, flecks of coppery red glittered in the brown strands. Delightful, thought Aria. She let the strands slip from her fingers as her eyes, a greeny blue even though she didn't know that yet, drifted up to the white building that loomed in front of her. It was very large, and she bit her lip and wondered how she would find whoever she was looking for in a place that big. Well, thought Aria decisively, one thing at a time. First, the shadow. She couldn't just run off and leave it there in the lot. Well, she could, but that would be strange. So she located its head behind her and its feet in front of her, and then she took 2 small steps forward so that her shoes nested cleanly into the shoes of the shadow instead of standing on its stomach. Aria then rolled her from her heels to her toes and back a few times until she was sure the shadow had stuck. Moving when she moved, stopped when she stopped, and behaving in all ways like a perfectly normal shadow. Once she was satisfied that it wouldn't come loose, Aria smoothed her skirt, tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, and made her way to the hospital. A dozen steps led to a set of glass doors, and a man and a woman were sitting halfway up the stairs, huddled side by side despite the warm day. The woman seemed upset, very upset, and Aria wanted to help, but she couldn't. She shouldn't, because there was no blue smoke. Aria knew she wasn't supposed to get involved unless she saw the blue smoke. It was the reason she was here. The smoke would show her the person who needed her help. The fact the shadow had brought her to the hospital meant someone inside would be marked by it. The people on the steps weren't. As sad as they seemed, they must not need the kind of help that Aria, or someone like her, could provide. Aria reached the revolving glass doors and stopped. not just because the door itself was strange and vaguely concerning, but because there in the glass she saw something for the first time. Herself. It was one thing looking at the pieces, hands, shoes, skirt, hair, but it was such another bigger, better thing to see herself as a whole. Well, almost whole. Her eyes hovered on the empty space above her shoulders, the place where her wings would be, once she'd earned them. Just then the revolving doors jerked into motion, and Arya jumped back as a man came through the turning portal. He left the glass spinning, Arya's reflection coming and coming again. She darted forward, jumping back out on the other side, and found herself inside the hospital. The lobby was filled with people, some in white coats, moving briskly, and some in regular clothes, slumped in chairs. Others were still pacing or waiting or talking to one another or to no one. Arya scanned the crowd, but she didn't see any smoke. "Good afternoon," said a woman behind the desk. "How can I help you?" Arya approached the desk. "I'm just trying to find someone." "Who are you looking for?" asked the woman. "Oh, I don't know," said Arya brightly. "I haven't found them yet." The woman frowned, but before she could say anything, Arya smiled and added, "Don't worry, I'll know them when I see them." And with that, she set off down the hall on the left. If the woman had been looking closely, she might have noticed that each of the fluorescent lights overhead grew a little brighter as Arya passed beneath them, or that the scuffs on the linoleum faded under her shoes, leaving the floor clean and new. But she didn't notice. No one did. They were small changes, the kind you sensed but couldn't put your finger on. Arya made the world a little nicer just by being in it. She explored 2 floors in search of the smoke, scanning halls, peering through windows and around doors, until she stumbled upon a common room. Several children clustered around a TV, a few others sat around a table with a puzzle, but it was the boy by the window who caught her eye. He was pale and blond and wreathed in smoke. The dark plumes hung around him like a cloud as he stared out the window. But as Arya drew closer, she frowned. His smoke was the wrong color. Arya was meant to find blue smoke, but the cloud circling the boy's shoulders was a dark bruised purple, almost black. He was definitely marked, but not for Arya. "Henry," said a voice, and the boy by the window looked up as a nurse carried a cup of water over to his wheelchair. Arya wondered why Henry was here, and why he was shrouded in such a grim cloud. She looked around, searching for someone like her, maybe someone with a charm bracelet to match that particular shade of purple-black smoke. But no one stood out. In fact, Arya was the only person in the common room who didn't look like she belonged there. Until another girl came in. She was about Arya's size, with warm, tan skin and rich dark hair. But what caught Arya's attention wasn't the girl's skin, or her hair, or the notebook she was clutching to her chest. It was the blue smoke swirling around her shoulders. Smoke the exact same color as Arya's bracelet. The girl wove absently through the tables and chairs, lost in her own thoughts, and flopped down onto the couch in the corner. Arya hesitated. She'd been so focused on finding the smoke, she didn't know what to do now. So she stood there watching, hoping the girl would give some clue as to what was wrong. The girl didn't seem sick, not like the other kids in the common room. But that didn't surprise Arya. After all, the smoke had nothing to do with sickness. It marked a person only if Arya could help them. And she couldn't help sickness. She wasn't a healer. She didn't even know if those existed. Arya was just Arya. And whatever was wrong with the blue smoke girl, Arya was pretty sure she wouldn't figure it out by standing there. Plus, she was beginning to feel awkward about staring. So she took a deep breath, walked up to the girl on the couch, and said, "Hello."